So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our third event for the Environment Campaign 2021. I'd like to introduce Professor Caroline Orfila, who is from the School of Food Science and Nutrition at the University of Leeds. And Caroline today is going to give us a little bit of a background to the impact of food production on the natural environment, and so we can make up our own minds about what might be the best diet for us to eat if we want to sort of take care of the planet and look after the planet. So Caroline, I'm going to pass over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jo. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just leave it in this mode to make sure you can see it. So thank you very much. Yes, I am from the School of Food Science and Nutrition, and my interests lie at the interface between plant science, food science, and nutrition. So I'm often asked my opinion about, what it means to shift towards plant-based diets. But I think it's very important to have a balanced debate about what the benefits, but also perhaps the drawbacks of shifting towards plant-based diets are, both from the environmental and a health perspective. So I'm going to start with two quotes that I have heard recently that have had quite a big impact on me. So the first one was by Vel Nanendran, and he is the Director for Environment and Climate at the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. And he was speaking at an event recently, and he said that we will not achieve the 1.5 degree target that was set in the Paris Agreement unless we make progress with transforming the food system. And the second quote is by Professor Leslie Jones, who is a professor of biology and a climate scientist, as well as vice chancellor at Macquarie University in Australia. And she gave an interview for the Guardian newspaper where they were debating whether 1.5 degree target was actually still achievable. And she finished the article with a very strong sentence. She said, "Every choice matters." And that to me means that all of us have a choice to make, and that we have to take action at every level. So that is every individual, every household, every institution, every city, region, country. We have to decide, do we want to do something about the climate? But I think in terms of food production, we have to remember that every type of food production has some impact on our environment. And that's because all types of food production use resources from the natural environment. So agriculture uses land, uses water, and depends on living things. And that's not just the crops and the animals that we eat, but also pollinators, soil microbes, etc. And giving you some information from a very useful website called Our World in Data. I really strongly encourage you to have a look at it. The website presents some of the environmental impacts of food and agriculture. And we often focus on greenhouse gas emissions. And yes, food does produce some greenhouse gases. And you can see that 26% of the global greenhouse gas emissions come from food production. But you can also see that food and agriculture also contribute to other environmental impacts, including taking up 50% of the habitable land on our planet. And do remember that our population is rising, but our land surface isn't. Our planet has a set size, if you like. So we are predicted that this figure will grow. As population grows, we will need to produce more food. The next column shows the fact that food and agriculture use 70% of fresh water use, and that is a very high number, and contribute 78% of global fresh and marine pollution. So you can see that it's far more than just greenhouse gases. And the last column is really quite shocking, and is the fact that out of non-human animals, 94% of all animals living on Earth are livestock. So these are animals that we eat for food consumption. So I hope that that's given you some idea that agriculture and food do have environmental impacts. But let's focus on greenhouse gas emissions. And again, using data from these websites, I hope you can read the letters, but I will take you through it nevertheless. You can see that beef production has the most greenhouse gas emissions associated with it. So this is normalized per kilogram of produce. And the greenhouse gases produced by beef production include carbon dioxide and other gases, here shown in red, but also methane, which is emitted by the beef. And methane is a short-lived greenhouse gas, but it's quite an effective greenhouse gas. So it does have quite big consequences on our atmospheric chemistry. You can then see other foods have a lower greenhouse gas emissions. So here's beef average, so either herds or farmed animals. But you can also see some plant products up there. So chocolate and coffee, things that we enjoy very much, do have some significant greenhouse gas emissions attributed to them. But then you can then start seeing some other animal products. And here I want to highlight chicken, which has 10 times less the emissions compared to beef. So even changing from beef to other animal products can have, reduce the environmental impact. You can also see eggs, which has half of what a chicken would produce. And then you start getting into very small numbers here for most of the plant-based products. Most plant-based products do not produce methane. And so mainly it's carbon dioxide. Have a little bit of methane production associated with rice, and that is because there are bacteria in the paddies that produce some methane. Okay, so I think you can see that if we are able to choose some of the foods that have lower greenhouse gas emissions, that will have a contributing effect. But let's turn our attention now to what diet is best from a nutritional point of view. So here I'm showing you a picture of our food-based dietary guidelines that are released by the UK government for every person here. And you can see that the dietary guidelines include a number of different foods which are grouped into food groups. So we can see here the fruits and vegetables that contain a variety of them, both fresh form, frozen or canned, or dried even. We then have the starchy foods, which include mainly cereals, but also potatoes. We then have a protein-rich group here that includes meat. So we can see here beef, but also fish and chicken, eggs, nuts, legumes, and they can also be fresh, tinned, dried, etc. We then have the dairy and dairy alternatives, which include milk, dairy products, but are also now including plant drinks, and then a little contribution from fats and oils. And you can see now the treats are outside of our guidelines, so they should be consumed sparingly. And then we have water here and juice that should be limited to 1 glass a day. But what I want you to really get out of it is that we need a very diverse diet, and that diversity would ensure that that we get all the nutrients that we need. So every time that somebody removes a food or a food group from their diet, they need to work hard at making sure that those nutrients are compensated for. And looking at some of the common nutrient deficiencies in UK children and adolescents, and I know that some of you will be, moving from adolescence to early adulthood. And in the UK, we still see iron deficiency, vitamin A and vitamin D deficiency. And unfortunately, these micronutrients here are concentrated in animal-based foods. So iron we can find across different food groups, but it's highly concentrated in meat products. So iron found in hemoglobin in muscle foods, is the most concentrated, but also the most available to our body. So if we remove these meat products, we have to ensure that we have sufficient iron in the other foods that we're consuming in order to compensate for that. In terms of iodine, we can only find it in foods from the sea, so fish, seafood, and algae. So again, removing animal products such as fish and seafood, you have to then incorporate seaweed into your diet, or iodized salt, I guess. And then vitamin A, for example, again, abundant in the animal products and the dairy products. So removing them, you can compensate with orange, red fruits and vegetables. And finally, vitamin D, which we can make ourselves from exposure to sunshine. But in foods, we can find them in fish, in oily fish, a little bit in dairy, maybe a little bit in added to oils and fats, and a few added to some breakfast cereals. But very small number of foods contain vitamin D, and therefore removing some of the animal products can have an impact. So what I'm trying to say here is that, we need to be mindful that we need, as humans, a diverse range of foods, and removing them means that we have to pay extra attention to ensuring that we're adding those nutrients from a different source. Now, recently, a group of scientists, collectively known as the EAT Forum, released a new set of food-based dietary guidelines, which, according to their research, was the best for both health and sustainability. And so you can look up their guidelines on this website here. And you can see that it looks a little bit different from our own food-based dietary guidelines, with a much larger contribution from fruits and vegetables, smaller contribution from the starchy whole grains and starchy vegetables, and then very quite a small contribution from animal protein, and a bigger wedge for plant source protein. And when you read the guidelines in detail, they give you portion sizes for animal source protein. And what they recommend is either 30 grams of chicken or poultry per day, or 15 grams of beef, lamb, or goat. And when you look that up, how much is that in terms of an actual food? 30 grams of chicken is half a chicken nugget, and 15 grams of beef, lamb, or goat are a very small meatball. And so this is, according to them, what we should be consuming for health and sustainability. And you can see that that's a lot smaller than most of us would consume as part of a single meal. But I think I want to also show you some recent research that we've done in my group, where we mapped the production and the consumption of food around Leeds. So this is the city we live in. This is Leeds City region here, highlighted in green, with some more populated areas here in red, orange, and yellow. And you can see that we do have agriculture, crop production, particularly to the east of the city. And these are the crops that are produced, and they are dominated by energy crops. So these are crops that give us energy, including the cereals, such as wheat and barley, but also beets, which we use for sugar production, and oilseed rape, which we use for oil production. So very little diversity in terms of fruits and vegetables, so not really matching our food-based dietary guidelines. But we can also see that to the west of the city, we have very little crop production. And that's because it's the landscape is mainly moorlands. And here we have fairly poor soils, very exposed, where most of the time what we can grow is grass, and we don't eat grass. So we are able to grow have farm sheep, and they convert that grass into meat, and that then is available for consumption. So we have a limit into how much we can change our agricultural system. I think certainly we can diversify to ensure that there's a lot more that we could consume locally, but we have to work with the land that we have. And I want to mention here regenerative farming, and this is an example here where we have a limited number of livestock, integrated into crop agriculture, so plants, and perhaps also integrating some aquaculture and some seaweed cultivation. So perhaps we need to change our minds away from kind of very intensive monoculture that we're used to towards more mixed polyculture, where animals might have a role to play in helping us with land management, but perhaps that the focus still has to be on shifting away from large scale livestock to smaller scale with more plants and seaweed and so forth. And then finally, I want to give you a little bit of an idea that the idea of changing menus, as you will be debating soon, is very much at the forefront of research. And it has been demonstrated that changing menus in canteens and canteens where there's lots of people coming every day, is actually a really good way to promote healthy, sustainable diets. And what people have shown is rather than discouraging meat consumption, it's better to promote fruit and veg consumption, because that empowers consumers to choose the right thing. And so there's been a number of case studies where they have made the fruits and vegetables attractive. They have made price promotions, so they has to be affordable. They have made different stickers, or you have to collect points and things like that. So kind of a little playful thing, but also encouraging people to make the right choice. And I think that could be something that you debate in case you don't want to ban people from eating meat, but you might want to encourage more people to choose fruits and vegetables or plant-based diets. So that is my last research slide. And I think I want to finish by making you think about things that you can do to change your diet into more healthy and sustainable choices. And I think the first one is to learn where your food comes from, and to always question that a healthy diet is not always sustainable. And that a sustainable diet is not always healthy. So you have to find that sweet spot between health and sustainability. And that is very much context specific, depends where you live and what life stage and what your choices are. I think I want you to be open to innovative solutions, and you are at the moment the future of this planet, and you will be working in areas where if you can find innovative solutions to reduce the environmental impact of food production, that would be great. And there's plenty of technologies that are helping us do that. And I think every one of us needs to take action at every level. So I think it's fantastic that the college is thinking about this and talking about it, and I hope that you will come up with some really good actions. So thank you. I want to finish there, and we are active across mainly Twitter, and so I have a personal account that I mainly talk about food and nutrition, and we have an account for the school and also for the institute that I help to co-lead. So thank you very much, and have a good debate.
Thank you very much, Caroline. That was really interesting. I don't know if anyone's got any questions for Caroline. I was interested about soya production for animal feed, because obviously that's quite a big topic, isn't it? And I don't know if it's so much about climate change, but the destruction of sort of rainforests to grow soya to feed animals. Sort of, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because soya itself is it's a good crop in the sense that it's able to capture carbon, it's able to capture nitrogen as well and fix it into the soil. So soya itself is environmentally not a negative crop, and also nutritionally, it's a good source of protein, it's a good source of unsaturated fats. So I think that we need to think about soya being actually quite a productive crop, and I think that's why it's been so successful. And the problem has been that that we need space to grow this crop, and therefore there has been mass deforestation of sometimes even ancient forests to replace it with agricultural land. And a lot of the time that has been used for soya production. So I think it's probably important to bear in mind that it's not necessarily the soya itself, it's the agricultural system that grows soya, if that makes sense. And I think that, that is still happening, unfortunately. We're still seeing land expansion. And as I mentioned in one of our slides, because human population is increasing, we need to produce more food, and that means that we have to expand agricultural land use for agriculture. But I think a lot of the emphasis has now been focused on shifting the soya that is produced, rather than going to feed animals, to go and feed humans. And that could be a quite good way of using that quite positive benefits of soya, if you like, but directly for human consumption, that rather than then going to animals, which then makes everything, it just leads to even more consequences, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Okay, I've got another one about micronutrients. So plant protein. So this is perhaps a bit more on soya, isn't it? Soya and beans. Those nutrients like iron and iodine, are they available in the plant proteins? If we need more iron, where can we get that? I know you can get it in your leafy greens, can't you? But where else can you get that in your diet? That iron.
Yeah, so I think if we mention iron, because iodine is mainly found in very few foods, so seafood, fish, and seaweed, and actually iodine is quite a big problem in the UK, and we need to talk about that a lot more. But yes, in terms of iron, you're right. The iron that is found in plants, first of all, is less concentrated, so you need to eat quite a lot of plants to get the equivalent amount that you would get in a piece of meat, I suppose. But even then, when you eat it from plants, sometimes it's not readily available, and that's because it's either within or associated with the fiber, and that takes a bit of effort for our digestive system to get it out. But also the form it's in, it's slightly less well absorbed by our body. So you can enhance it by making sure you cook your vegetables, your beans, all of that, to soften the structure of the fiber to be able to release the iron into the digestive system. You can also take, when you take those iron sources from plant sources, to take it with vitamin C. So you can have a glass of orange juice with your baked beans, and the ascorbic acid from the juice will help you absorb or keep it in the right form for absorption. So there's a number of strategies that you can take to kind of maximize the amount of iron that you absorb from plants. But I think it's important to bear in mind you will have to eat a lot of plants to get the same benefit. And I think that's where promoting plant-based diets is important, so people eat more vegetables, if you see what I mean, and that way they will get enough for their needs.
Okay, thank you. And I suppose if people are moving to more plant-based diets, they have to be aware, don't they? Very much aware. There's an education there, isn't there, about nutrient deficiency in certain things, especially iron among. I always think about iron among young girls. It's obviously a really important thing to think about.
Yeah, that's correct, and you're right to highlight that group, because I think we have a statistic that about 40% of young women or girls, adolescent girls, are iron deficient. So, we're already at a point where there's significant levels of deficiency in that group, and if we then remove a food group which is important for that, then we might end up with more. So I think it's important to raise awareness amongst that group that they need to eat more iron-rich foods, and I guess that diversity is important. So not depending on meat sources, but having a range of iron-rich foods so that they get as much as possible from different places.
Thank you. I was shocked by the diversity on that first graph you showed, when you showed the 94% of animals on the planet are things that are livestock. That's absolutely shocking.
Yeah. So, I think maybe we have to reduce that a little bit. So I think, there's been a lot of things in the press recently as well about, not being anti-cow, is what they've used, the new term. It's not being against animals. It's just making sure that it's proportionate to what our planet needs and what our human needs are. And yeah, I think that that's the new thinking, is to integrate them into crop systems and having, you know, a role for them, but not in a mass scale, if that makes sense. So yeah, production is driven by consumption. So I think consumers can, to some extent, if they change their habits, the agriculture will respond, you know. So but I think that, as I mentioned in my last slide, or the one before, is learning where your food comes from, and I think that we have lost that connection with food production. And you know, also the value of food it's almost been devalued, so we pay very little attention to our food, really. And you know, I think we need to elevate it back to being something very important, and learning where things come from. And you know, that I think that way we can make informed decisions about what we eat. You know, I was quite shocked when I saw the graph about coffee and chocolate, because I'm a big coffee and chocolate consumer. But when I saw that graph, I thought, actually, maybe I need to maybe think what could be the alternative that would give me the same, you know, amount of eating, you know, niceness, but perhaps with a lower environmental impact. So I think, you know, just being aware of lots of things like that, little shifts, I think, can make eventually a big shift.
So thank you ever so much for coming along
No problem.
this afternoon and giving us your time.
Good luck with the debate next week.